Alright, this one is on primarily the Pawnee. Pawnee territory was most of Nebraska. And they were primarily farmers, and as a result of being primarily farmers, they tended to get their butts whooped. The Cheyenne and the Sioux would go steal their stuff. That was basically the history of the Pawnee for a long time. We grow stuff, and the Sioux come and kill us and take it. We grow stuff, and the Cheyenne come kill us and take it. The Pawnee at one time took up most of the space in between Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the eastern seaboard. They were very large. A lot of tribes that broke up later on were originally, origins started with the Pawnee. The Pawnee, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that the Pawnee were our scouts. We always talk about the Apache scouts and the Crow scouts. We don't often talk about the Pawnee or the sheer brutality of the Pawnee. That comes from years of savage warfare from both sides. Ultimately, they sided with the United States. And this ended up being their downfall. This is where we got screwed over worse than anybody else. Worse than the Trail of Tears. I mean, we're talking about near decimation to a man. Now, how did this happen? Well, for starters, it didn't stop for them after the Indian Wars. It only got worse. Now, to many Native American nations, the Crow were considered traitors to everybody. And why aren't the Pawnee given that reputation? They did the same thing. Well, it's because the sheer decimation of the Pawnee population never ended. How odd is that? How did this happen? Well, alright, we had the wars between the Cheyenne, Sioux, and Pawnee going all the way up to the 1840s, nearly purely native on native battles. Primarily on Pawnee territory, primarily Cheyenne claiming that that it was theirs by right of hunting is kind of the idea. I don't know how to explain that concept because I don't quite understand it. But the Pawnee, when they hunted buffalo, hunted deer, hunted anything of that nature, they didn't really have horses for most of their history. They would try to do something that modern ranchers absolutely hate their cattle doing. You get the cattle or the buffalo or the deer out on the Great Plains. You find a little area where there's some water. You know that everything is going to come there to drink that water. And you just wait for it. Or you drive it into the woods and into the water, and then it's going to have problems. You try to find a place where it's mostly mud and not rock. You're going to get mucked in it, and you're going to have yourself some easy to catch dinner. Now, one of the most famous battles between the U.S. and Native Americans is the Battle of Little Bighorn. Let me ask you, who won the Battle of Little Bighorn? Was it George S. Custer? No, he died. Now, let's see. What U.S. general, and we're not talking about just Reno and Benty, were supposed to be, I was right, supposed to be, because There were 9 generals in total. 3 of them were the big generals, Custer and 2 others. All right. I say supposed to be because most of them didn't show up. Let's see. Battle of Little Bighorn. It says the plan was for Custer's cavalry and Brigadier General Alfred Terry's infantry to rendezvous with troops under command of Colonel John Gibbon and Brigadier General George Crook. Indeed. What happened to those men? Well, one of them got his butt whooped and the other one had diarrhea. Neither one of them showed up. But also, if you've ever been to the Little Bighorn battlefield, and I have, I've walked Bentine's route, I've walked Reno's route. I've never walked Custer's route, and now with my physical abilities, I will probably never be able to do such a thing. We'll see what future technology holds and how expensive it is, right? How long I live. All right, so we're talking about the Pawnee, right? We talk about the blankets. Who were the ones who received the most blankets that were filled with disease? So that would be the Pawnee. That was after they were officially settled. You could, I guess, call it a reservation the way that you can, I guess, call Crow Agency a reservation. You took the crappiest land and you shoved a whole bunch of people onto it, gave them a bunch of blankets to kill them. How did the Pawnee end up with them being our scouts and our guides, our helpers? How did they end up getting the worst end of the stick out of all of it? Well, let's start off with the fact that the Sioux and Cheyenne didn't stop. Even after being shoved onto reservations, there was a lot of hatred there, not a lot of love lost. And of course, there's also the United States having its requirements of stupidity. Now we can skip out on the full-sail exodus and export of the Pawnee in 1910 to 1918. Yes, we sold them. You can find out what was going on during that period of time. It was a precursor to war that everybody knew was Pawnee sent. Were they sent to the Germans? Were they sent to the Australians? Were they sent to the Austrians? Were they sent to the British? They were sent to all of them. But that's not where we'd estimated the majority of them. Would it be World War II? No. We had 2 very, very major periods of time where we basically got rid of everybody who was Pawnee. We sent them all to Catholic homes to learn how to become proper Americans, or Lutheran homes to learn to become proper Americans. Later on, there was a lot of tribes that wanted their kids back, and there weren't hardly any Pawnee. And the United States, after getting rid of as many Pawnee as they did, they went, all right, we got a bunch of these little red kids. And that's what they were written down as, red children. They had a bunch of red children of no ancestry. Nobody bothered to write down where they came from. Nobody bothered to write down who their next of kin were. Or they couldn't read the chicken scratches. The ones that could remember where they were from, they called them Pawnee and sent them to parts of Nebraska. So then, of course, we had 1864, what happened there, the end of the Civil War. We had a lot of generals and not as many soldiers. That's how you ended up 9 generals altogether that were supposed to be at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and not a whole lot of troops. Now, this isn't all of it. A lot of these ancestors of the Pawnee, or a lot of the descendants, I should say, of the Pawnee, many of these children were forced into these homes, and then later on we wanted to reconcile by saying, oh, well, these must be your missing children because we don't have any records. Then World War II comes around, and of course, many of them were drafted. You guys talk about the Navajo Code Pawnee scouts, that they knew the terrain and they knew the territory, and that's not really the same kind of scouting as you would do in a military and enemy held territory. It was not the same thing. These also weren't trained trackers. They just assumed Pawnee. They worked for us as scouts. They must have retained that information. World War II come around, and a Sioux scout isn't going to do you much good in a war like that. After the war, this is our last major exodus for the Pawnee. Most of them weren't actual Pawnee by that point. They were Sioux, they were Crow, they were Cheyenne, they were anyone but Pawnee. Maybe a few of them might have been Pawnee, a few of them. But if you go, all right, well, this person was taken from their parents when they were 3. We don't remember who it is that they belong to. We only have their given white name in our documents. So, basically, Christopher Joseph is Pawnee. So we're going to send Christopher Joseph to the Pawnee Reservation in Nebraska and tell them that they're Pawnee, and tell the other Pawnee descendants, the few that are left, that this is their family. They've been missing for so long. 1956, this is after the war. And this is where we went and took anybody who was brown in Nebraska, including the sort of Pawnees that were left. And we had a lot of them military buses. It's basically a school bus that's just painted green. They would transport U.S. troops all over the United States in these things. After the war, they used them for rounding up anybody that's brown. Now keep in mind that all of the territory that we're on this side of the country used to be part of Mexico. So there's a lot of Mexican-looking people here that racists don't like. They've been here since before the United States was a country, their families at least. Same thing with the natives who live in all of these places. They've been here since before the United States was a country. In 1956, we drove through Nebraska and Colorado and Kansas and Wyoming and Montana, and anybody who was brown we sent to Mexico. If they were Puerto Rican, we sent them to Mexico. If they were Navajo, we sent them to Mexico. If they were Crow, we sent them to Mexico. If they were Sioux, we sent them to Mexico. In 1956, we sent a lot of people to Mexico. And that there is where we ended up in much of the situation we have today of people being entirely and completely ignorant of who the Pawnee even are. We've got other nations that have a full identity and know who their people are and know who their elders are and can still trace their lineages back. But for the Pawnee, many of them don't even know if they're Pawnee. Anyway, I figured I had to make mention of that. Being as Chapel, Nebraska, and Cheyenne County, Nebraska, all the way to Cheyenne, Wyoming, none of that was Cheyenne. Not one bit of that was Cheyenne. It was all Pawnee.
practice